you know, for me, it's like a really painterly image. And I love like winter and like winter scenes. And I always felt the winter was very wondrous anyway. It's like growing up in Indiana. And this like one like really resonated with me. And I follow Shannon on Instagram, and I've been a really big fan of her paintings for a while. So I was very surprised to see her apply, and also like very pleased. You know, like just the range of color and like sense of surface in this painting, I think is like really nice. She's not trying to be overly specific. It's like really evoking like an atmosphere for me, right? Like just sort of the magic of like winter nights.
I always think of like, there always seems to be this attention paid to the way that light reflects off of like positive spaces, like off of snow, off of grass, the way light hits trees, things like that. And in this, it seems so much more like this focus and intention is paid to the shadows that are occurring across the ground and in the trees. What we would typically kind of ignore, maybe in observation, is actually being played with, and like the attention is being brought to the sort of negative spaces there. I thought was really fun.
I agree. I think when I was looking at all of her paintings, I think the negative shapes were more, almost like drew me in more. They were more interesting than the positive, the ones we recognize. There's like so much nuance between color and gradient in those shapes. And they vary, like, if you look at them closely, they vary from like where one branch forms a shape on one side to the other side of the branch. It's like a totally different color, and it creates like a second painting almost. Like you kind of like go back and forth between those two.
Yeah, it makes me think of Piet Mondrian's paintings before they got super abstract, like where there's like a tree series where it like continually gets abstracted because the emphasis is on the negative shapes a whole lot, or the intersections of like positive and negative shapes. And especially like at the top of the trees, you know, it's like she painted the trees and then went back and really emphasized the negative shapes, because you see the paint overlapping a lot of the brushes or the branches, you know, which I think is really nice. It's just a really wonderful like painting, you know, in terms of craft and application of color. But like I think it fit the exhibition like really well.
And I also, since we're talking about her paintings, I thought her artist statement revealed a lot to the final product as well, because, you know, seeing the paintings are so like well crafted and skillful, but then like reading her artist statement, she apparently spends so much time on site kind of creating these things, and it just made me think about the process, like, you know, going back to the theme of the show, like the process, the artistic process of making art kind of creates a space in itself for contemplation. So I think this is like really interesting to see the product of it, and, you know, maybe the environment and space that she creates for herself when she's painting contributes to like the mystery and the mood of the final product.
Yeah, that how her artist, or the statement about the work ends with this talking about the entanglement between the sort of human world and natural world, and that really comes through in the work, I think, not only in the way that the colors play, that like almost underpainting, like a painting behind a painting, but also that the way the shadows come down from the trees and don't, there's kind of no hierarchy between the two. There's no differentiation between the two. And they really are sort of visually entangled, not only in the shapes that the branches and shadows make, but also between the positive and negative, like the built up layers of this like painting on top that is the snowy field with the house in the distance versus all the colors that are happening in the almost in the painting that's underneath. It makes me think that there's like this whole other world, another painting below that are sort of caught in both of them.
Yeah, that's a really great point I think you guys are making. And it makes me think of like Peter Doig as well, and like the kind of magical realism, like just the multi-use of color and everything. So like, yeah, this hidden world or world underneath, I think is a great way to put it.
I had thought about Peter Doig too. Like he was the first artist I thought about when I saw her paintings. It kind of reminded me, and so I was like looking back at his paintings, and it's interesting to compare the two because hers seem more rooted in reality. They don't seem so fantastical.
Yes.
And there's an element that I really like about that. Like, especially I was looking at her at Suckers, the tree, kind of like focusing in on one object. And that's like, there's something really nice about just like prioritizing one thing and like putting all of your energy in it and like representing it in a way that's representational, but still mysterious, and not overemphasizing the mystery. Kind of, I don't know. I think there's a nice balance between like the representation and the magical almost.
Yeah, like too, that there's that like in the Rice Creek Townhouses 2 painting, that there's that one little window that's lit in the house in the distance. It kind of calls back to like the observer, as opposed to being like, look at this beautiful scene that I've painted from this vantage point. But you're actually looking at it. You see the window in the background, and you not only place yourself where the viewer is looking at the painting from, but also like you put yourself in the house looking out the window in a kind of way. There's like a reflective sort of moment that happens. It reminds me of like old Edward Hopper paintings, where there's like oftentimes there's like a light on in the window, in a window somewhere.
Yeah.
Sort of places our vantage point, our viewing point, in 2 different locations at the same time.
That makes you think of some of the photos that were by another artist in the show. I think it's Dana Smessert. The photos I'm talking about, where it's like the house is kind of straight on and there's lights on it. Yeah, in the neighborhood. That definitely has that kind of feel to me as well.
I'm just like curious about, this isn't like a value statement at all. I'm just like curious about the process. Like, I just wonder, when she was painting, did she really see a house with just one light on, or did she edit? Like, was it like a intentional choice to put that in there, because it does create like this sense of like a different sense of perspective. Like, you can wonder about who's in that house now. It's not abandoned. It's just interesting.
I know Janie. She taught part-time at Flagler down here. And I've seen some of her other work before that incorporated like performative aspects and like video projections on drawings, I think, or video on like cinder blocks. These are different. Like for me, like they are, they're physical in a different way. Like I guess I'm saying that her other work seemed like really physical, like labor, like moving cinder blocks, crushing cinder blocks and stuff. But here, the labor of this like intense recording, that to me is like super contemplative, like getting lost in all the minutia of all these rocks on this, this surface. And I think the title is actually quite appropriate, Unfocused Territory, right? Because you can't focus on everything, right? You just kind of have to wander around.
There's for me, beyond the sort of spectacle of this highly rendered, looks photographic, the sort of like labor intensive, and even Janie even talks about the sort of exhaustion of a material. Like, it's kind of exhausting to look at from the point of knowing it's a graphite drawing. But beyond that, there's something really wonderful about that sort of willingness to put in the labor to do such a highly detailed drawing, but also alongside that or beyond that or deeper within that is this sort of observation of a pretty mundane photograph. Like, it's not like we're not looking at an epic landscape or a big, majestic mountain or something like that. It's just like some gravel or pebbles or sand and rocks for the most part. And so I think I feel like Janie's work really responded to the kind of prompt that we had for the show, and this sort of slowing down. You talk about, or the prompt for the show talks about living in this sort of world that is moving ever faster and with greater efficiency. And so the act of really slowing down and taking the time to do a drawing like this is really, I think, really hits the mark for me on this, wondering about something, even something as mundane as, a pile of rocks.
I think what you're saying about just the mundaneness of it, and just like, it doesn't matter what it is, really, just the act of slowing down and just like spending time focusing on something, and coupled with the exhaustion of like the material, but also like the exhaustion of like the body, right? To like try to focus, to like put in this time. It's like when I look at this, I immediately kind of thought about meditation, because I think about like anybody who's like really doing something highly rendered like that, or something kind of monotonous in a way. Like there is that sort of elevation of the thinking or the sort of awareness, right, into this sort of like non-awareness in a way. I like that it's the mundane. It's not the epic mountain, or majestical landscape, that it's like zoomed in and focused, right? To kind of remind of like, this is like the thing, not the thing that's far away, right? Like kind of the here and now.
I think, and I was trying to remember the myth earlier, but Sisyphus, I think of Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the mountain with this one, because it is such like it is such a mundane subject and image, and it's just kind of like all the same, and we're rooted in the earth and looking at the earth, and there's nothing really heroic about it, but it's like the act itself means more than like the outcome, even though the outcome is beautiful and it's like, it's so impressive to see, but you're like, you could just take a photo of the ground and the gravel and have it look almost exactly like that. So like the value is more in the action of doing it than the outcome, I think.
It's a shame that we couldn't have this exhibition in person, because I think looking at this, or looking at both of her pieces side by side, I would start to feel the sort of weight of trying to focus for a long period of time on something like this. If I have to be outside looking for something in the ground, like if I'm working and I drop a screw just to find something within like a 2-foot radius, like, hurts my brain sometimes, because there's too much, but that, I think that's like part of the element of like, viewing the work, right? Is because then it allows you access to something similar.
Yeah, and I think the realism of it is essential to it, because you need that awe at first to like be drawn into it, and then you really start thinking about the process because of it.
Yeah.
It almost is like it's almost like it challenges too, I think, this sort of our expectations of what is like when we look at the landscape or we look at the land, what is the ideal thing to look at? What's worth making art about? What's worth how does depicting something, like there's a hierarchy involved in the sort of beautiful things to look at in the landscape. And to spend so much time rendering like the ground beneath your feet, in what could be like anywhere. there's no locality to, right? There's no location to it. To spend that much time observing that something so, I'm going to say what the general public would think of as pointless or something we ignore all the time is really like challenges our own expectations, in a refreshing way.
A question about music. I wouldn't want to.
What's that?
I wouldn't want to be tasked with drawing something like that, though. It's like exhausting looking at it.
I think there's definitely some like meditation involved in that, or some sort of like, it becomes a sort of like no mind process. Cause it's not, I can't imagine she's sitting there being like, okay, I'm going to draw this rock. And now I'm going to draw another rock. Oh no, I'm going to draw that rock. And then there's some space between and then another rock, right? It becomes sort of like unfocused, right? It just becomes.
Lose yourself in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have to negotiate that kind of space, that visual space, right? Yeah, I like what you said too about the hierarchy of things in the landscape to look at, and this being the sort of like the lowest kind of thing. It made me think of this book that I've been reading about like how different cultures throughout history have like viewed the earth. I think it's called The Way of the Earth, and I've been in the Greek section, and there was this idea about like the soil and soul of Greece for people. Like the soil was so important, right? Like people would always like touch it, like grab it and hold it in their hands. They sort of like longed for it because they felt like their ancestors were here in this sort of participation. I don't think that's necessarily what she may have been like thinking about, but like I can't help but sort of make that association when I see the ground, and I just start thinking about like time and history because of the rocks and the slow compression of time that it takes to form into something, right? The sort of long-term presence of something, right? But
there's almost this duality in there, like, or these conflicting ideas of like, it's nowhere, but it's also right there. Like, it's not the distant mountain peak. It's not the ideal thing. It's like, she very well could have just looked straight down and taken a photograph of the ground under her feet, right? Like, we could very well be looking right, like literally straight down at the ground where we actually are.
Yeah.
It's funny.
So important, but it's so very real, but also like meaningless at the same time, right?
Yeah.
I actually thought of Mars, like pictures of the ground of Mars when I saw it, which is like, it's a funny contrast because it could be anywhere. Like it literally could be anywhere in the in the solar system.
Yeah, but it's also the very thing that makes up the planet, So in a sense, it's like very like, universal, and it's very like important in that respect, right?
True.
And the title territory also sort of, it's not like unfocused ground or unfocused land. It's like unfocused territory, which denotes a certain like defined location, geographic location, or like where we as like a territory of living things, right? Civilization has a territory, or a culture has a territory. I guess animals have certain territories as well, but like it's not a continent. It's like a specific place. It's like denoting a specific place.
Yeah.
It kind of like it connotes ownership. I think.
Or like an indigeneity to a certain degree. Like, this is where we come from. Like, this is our land.
Seems like a very delicate thing, right? These thin pencil lines, and what's the other material she uses? It's like chalk, I think. Gouache, is that what it is? Immediately when I saw this one, I thought of Agnes Martin.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The lines, sort of like pencil lines that aren't entirely perfect, that just take concentration to make like steady, but really aren't steady. and then just the subtle layering of things, almost like it's like really thin, like it's going to evaporate, or it really has no presence, like she's trying to bring presence to something that has no presence, right?
I was interested in how she she explains the pieces in terms of her long-term meditation practice that she's had, and how they're not, like when I was first looking at them and I read the thing about meditation practice, I was thinking, oh, these are like, maybe this is sort of an interpretation of what she sees while she's meditating. But then in her statement, she talks about these drawings being tools for introspection, as if they were like things she looked at in order to imagine to enter meditation.
Yes. Yeah, it makes me think of a mandala. Like, the specific symmetry and imagery in those compositions of the mandala to help guide like different stages of meditation, right? To take you deeper and deeper, right? Like it gives you an object to focus on, and then you sort of like move down, or different monks used a kind of image in their mind to help like build, like, and as they sort of remembered it or built it in their mind, it allowed them to move into this like meditation. And I think it's pretty fascinating, because each one is so different, and I wonder like how does that help guide her into meditation each time, like are there like stronger or weaker designs that help with that?
Mm-hmm.
The intention of them seems to come through in the title, maybe. She's got prayer for plenty, prayer for illumination, prayer for coherence.
I was looking at another one of hers that had a star of Lakshmi, which I actually looked up because I didn't know about it. So it's like a Hindu, like a symbol in Hinduism.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much all I know about it. But I think that maybe speculating that like she's using these things to like things that have like helped so many other people to kind of get into the same space. Yeah. And like I like coherence as a word in the title, because it's like that just makes a lot of sense for me, thinking about like how to like relate or just like what's the purpose of meditation. You're trying to get somewhere to like a point of things unifying or something, and like it just made a lot of sense with the whole process that she uses to make these.
I think that's a good point too. I also like, when I saw these and I read the title, like I immediately felt like these were like, they totally belonged in the show, because, they are, even though they're abstraction, they're reaching for something that's like very real, like an experience. And I just felt like through the simplicity, there was something that was being pushed for, or like trying to be called forth, right? Like coherence, like, or illumination, trying to find like have something revealed, just to sort of stay together and stay present, or like have acknowledgement of like your surroundings, right? And I think like in what's this one? Prayer for plenty, right? Even like I didn't notice this like right at first, but the punctured marks, in the diamonds in the background, like really add a whole nother dimension for me, because I'm thinking about like her actually going through and systematically like poking these holes in there, and like a mantra, like, just sort of like doing this and maybe saying something every time, or like it's like a metronome, just slowly like creating like a mental space for her to just occupy, and the idea too that these things are like 7 by 5 inches. They're like,
yeah.
be like,
I was gonna comment on.
like you could sit with this thing, or like, like Orthodox Christians have little icons, and they don't have to be very big, but just like an area where they can just like focus on this thing that, points them somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's like a huge theme. I'll just real fast, is focus, like within this exhibition. And I think that's what drew a lot of people to it, a lot of applicants to it. And I think that's what draws a lot of people to art too, is like finding that space to focus.
Mm-hmm.
Just the, practice of art helps you do that. And then a lot of these works allow that space for you. You're like asked to view it from the artist, and like they're I think all of these kind of like help you block out just the rush of the world and focus, which is really important.
Yeah, the delicacy of how small that piece is, that 7x5, and to think of like those little painted circles and the graphite drawn circles, and even the punctures in the other piece too. It's just like small little things that are happening. It's not big, broad strokes. It's not performative. It's not like, it's not dramatic. It's just this like quiet, delicate, very mindful, very attentive process of making them. It really felt like there's a wonder in that, that's like slowing down again, the process, like you were saying, Lauren.
Yeah, just the intention with making these, like, is really great. I also really appreciate the like internal scale of the drawings. Like they feel like, before I knew the size of them, I thought they might be actually larger because they felt like they could be bigger. And I think just like in terms of composition, or just sort of like draftsmanship or something like that, like she really executed these really quite well. One thing I was thinking about, Lauren, when you said like sort of a theme in the show, this idea of focus, and Kim's statement, I mean, at the end, she's talking about, she believes art can help transform consciousness and by extension society, and I believe that too. And that viewing art like something like this, perhaps like is a way for other people to maybe enter into that kind of focus, or just sort of be present for a moment, like slow down, because like those things over time can be like transferable to other areas, right? Like if you continuously go and look at something and like practice like sort of slow observation or patience, or like you are doing that in the studio, like you can then take that somewhere else and apply it in the world, right? So like when I'm working and trying to be patient in my studio practice, like sometimes I have to remember that when I'm teaching my students to be, like I have to be like really patient at the same time, so yeah, I think it's really touches on a whole lot of things for me in terms of the exhibition.
Mm-hmm. I think these are really complex, and I really wish I could see these in person.
Yeah, I wish I could see this in person too, because it feels like there's a whole lot of things happening in this that I just can't quite get as an image, This one feels like really, I mean, there's obviously like the constellations in the background, like it definitely has like a cosmic feel to it, right? Like it's which is nice to coming right off of Kim Matthews' work, which is like so personal, introspective, like small scale. And this seems to be like expansive and like universal in a way. I mean, I keep trying to get closer to my computer to see it.
Yeah, I was like zooming in with my touchpad, like, what's going on in there? Yeah, it feels very like much like a sort of portal, or like a gateway into the universe. I like that idea that there's these associations of it looking like a subwoofer speaker or something like that, that like sound comes through it, or that it's like it has a rhythm, or it has like a resonance in it to a certain degree. And the sort of thinking about how we relate our personal experience to the cosmos, some unfathomable size and scale or structure that is like incomprehensible to our minds, but also completely structured within our human context of being on planet Earth, and constellations only being constellations to us. And the sort of relationship that's really like kind of it's very didactic, but also not at all. And I think that Georgiana even talks about this, like not intending to be didactic with the work, but there are all these sort of ins. There's like crosshairs. There's a binocular kind of view to this. There's this like tech. It almost feels like tech, or it's very slick. It's got these like pink and black and I don't know. It's like edgy and a little trippy, and I don't know. It's just like kind of calls all these things up from it without being any of them.
Yeah, it's kind of elusive in that way.
This is about, right? It's like, yeah, it's really elusive to me in a way. It's fascinating.
Well, I think it's like really unfamiliar, and the unfamiliarity is what makes, like, pushes me to like the cosmos or something. Like, it's out there, and there's like, it almost looks like she's trying to construct a language to like let you in on mystery or something that's unfamiliar. You just like are almost there, but can't quite like, or are unsure of what to do with the tools that she like has provided you or something.
Like a Stargate.
Exactly.
I want to pick it up off the wall and like
try to walk through it.
Put your head into it, like like listen to the cosmos. Yeah.
It's like a machine in a way.
I mean, I know, like, Lauren, you were like just like, saying like it reminded you of a speaker, and like I think like not in a super serious way, but but when Amory was talking about it too, I just kept thinking about like it's like this is like this cosmic speaker, or like this it's like, I think maybe speaker sort of cheapens the idea, but
communication.
Like, there is something like being transmitted, right? Like long term, like there is this sense of like time reoccurring, right? There's the circle, so it's like endless, right? And then there's this like square that's on its axis, like on a diamond, right? And then it looks like it suggests that it's maybe rotating, and inside that there's this sort of like vortex. But then the constellations out there, because they're cyclical and they move around, like there's all these sort of mechanisms, like these wheels like turning at different speeds, sort of constructing this like, I'm not really sure what to call it, like this elusive kind of geometry,
It's very uncanny.
It just, like I feel like I would like want to sit with this for a long time, like in person, because it seems like it has a lot of textural dimension as well. Especially the outside areas look like waves, like they're kind of carved in maybe, where it's like heavy paint. And it seems to be like just absorbing light, like a black hole.
Vanta black.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's like a good place to be in as an artist, to make something that's like, that gives the viewer enough cues to like really wonder about it, but not be so like, not steal so much from any one thing where someone's like, oh, that's just, a sci-fi movie or something like that. I think she's like reached a really good medium between the two.
Yeah.
This.
Yeah.
It kind of dips a toe in different sort of genre painting or like art object, sculpture object kind of, that also like movie prop kind of thing at the same time. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
I was noticing there's like the diamond shape with and then the wooden pieces on the frame are indicated kind of cardinal directions as well. So it becomes sort of like compass device in a way.
Yeah.
Like sort of wayfinding. There's a wayfinding to it that is coming
I think that's a good observation too. I wasn't quite sure what to make of the extra element in the corners, but I think compass is a great like reference point, and I think that definitely fits in with this kind of image, right? Because you do look at the constellations, like the North Star, right, to find your direction or something like that. This is also something that I felt like was like 6 foot or something like that. It just feels like it could be immense, like a big Rothko painting or something.
Something you can walk through.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a James Turrell. You're not sure that you can go into the space, but you really can go into the space, kind of thing.
There's something really haunting about it to me. This sort of relationship of constructed, like there's like this relationship between what could be maybe a tree or an animal and a boat or almost like a treehouse sort of form, or it almost it feels kind of like a boat. And like I think there's something really like that. There's this moonlit scene. It's riding this really nice line between being abstract and realistic.
Yeah,
that is really like I just want to keep looking at it. I'm not exactly sure why. But as soon as it starts to fall apart, I recognize something again. The color palette is really captivating. It feels sort of it's kind of sublime, and that there's this sort of almost perceived danger to the scene, but I feel safe at the same time looking at it, almost like it's a dream or something. Very dreamlike. It actually reminds me a lot of your work, Logan, which might be why I respond to it so well. But I'm just so captivated by it.
For that one, there's this like big aspect of photography, like it looks like a flash went off when this image was made and a painting was made, and it's, I think that contributes a lot to like the kind of like ominous feel to it. Like it's this hybrid between like a dream state and like a observation state, like someone's observing you, because like flash photography just kind of like brings that to mind, like the quickness of it, and like it's
almost unexpected or something.
Yeah.
I think this painting is really nice, actually. I know Montana. She took a class with me a few years ago. I think she's recently graduated from UF here. Seen some other of her works, and this one, like I think, really kind of blew me away. I thought this one was really quite nice for a lot of the same reasons you guys are describing. It does have this sort of ominous but welcoming feel, because it's, like it's like this like beautiful like night sky, and there's this like nice kind of water, and it's like illuminated, but then like, there's this slippage back into sort of like abstraction, but also like maybe like losing something, right? Because there's no sort of edge to anything. Like things are just sort of dissipating, or like they're coming into or going out of existence. And she even talks about that in her statement about like, like recalling spaces or memories from her like childhood backyards and trying to hold on to a sense of environment. So like for me, like, you know, like I remember the wonder of like being a kid and running around in the woods and like just imagining things and you know, playing there, right, and trying to hold on to that kind of like wonder. And I think here there is that element, but then like as an adult, there is a sort of realization that it's not that wondrous, or like you can't have that at the same time, right? Yeah, like, and it just has a like this quality of just I want to get lost looking into this painting. Like I want to know where this goes. This sort of tent structure seems to go back beyond, and I want to like go back in there. You know, it seems like there's like this little wood piece, this little raft or something in the back left, like floating off. I just want to hop on it and go for a ride. You know?
Like this one caught my attention. I mean, it did during the application process too, the juring process. All of hers did. I think it's just like, it's really nice, and the colors are, they grab your attention, and then she does a lot of other things with, it's not just like color fields, it's using materials that we're not used to seeing, and gold leaf and like really rich textural, like saturated materials with colors that catch our eye. I appreciated the way that she put these together, and they're not the usual composition. They're not just rectangles. They're like rectangles on rectangles. Just like really put a lot of effort to make the entire piece different than what we're used to experiencing, I guess. And then just it was nice to see work that was just like her artist statement says. She says, by making these works abstract, I'm appealing to our ability to look purely, to respond only to the sensation of seeing, to stay in the realm of visual sensation, delight, and wonder. Mm-hmm. I think it fit really well with the exhibition and the call. It was nice to just like exist with the work and not be told something, but just to like be given the space to view something like that.
Yeah, this makes me think of, you know, minimalist sculptures or minimalist paintings. And like you're saying, it's not just like a rectangle or just a square. Like there, you know, there's like a couple things like that have been added to it, or like the format's been shifted a little bit. But it's very much in a sort of like minimalist tradition and color field painting. But I feel like it's past that, because like none of them had, to my knowledge, like used gold leaf. You know, that like probably wouldn't have been a material that they would have been interested in. You know, and here, like I think, you know, for some people, they may have a hard time like really getting into this piece, because it's like, oh, it's this blue rectangle and this sort of like red violet, like washed out red violet, you know, slim rectangle. Like how does this have anything to do with like wonder? But then you think about like color is so directly tied to like our experience, right? And has such a visceral effect on us. That I think like this is like essentially like distilling those experiences, like she's saying, like down to this sort of like combination of these two elements working together. And I think it's like, it's really lovely. Like that blue is just so like deep, right? Like in the top left, there's a little bit of variation. And as it goes down, it gets a little bit darker. So like, I think like being in front of this thing would be an even stronger experience, like with that kind of focus and the appreciation of the material and surface as well, you know?
Yeah, it reminded me of the light and space movement too in California in the 60s, using new technologies with aerospace and engineering, and like the artist, like James Turrell was like the big leader of that movement, but like artists incorporated those into their works to create kind of like a just phenomenological experience.
Yeah.
I think she uses like gold leaf and micaceous iron oxide, which contains glitter. And it reminds me of there's a piece at the museum I used to work at that was made out of only the paint that you use on roads to like mark what lane you're in, like the white paint that glows when light hits it. And it's just like this giant, like 12-foot grid of these squares that this artist put together with just that on it. But like every spot you were in, when you looked at it, it was like a totally different painting, but also something like you don't usually see that close.
Yeah.
And I think I think she does that a little bit with her materials too.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the work. I had this piece specifically because there was this, you see a lot of the work that we've gotten for this show is sort of these like complex observations of things or complex relationships between things that have a lot of representational aspects or very realistic aspects, and even some photography. And that as we start to think of like this, like the idea of what wonder is to in a lot of this work seems to be tied so much to like what we're observing in a three-dimensional space, or what we're imagining as like a place, as being in a place. But this piece was really quite refreshing in that you were saying at the beginning, Lauren, about you're just with the shapes and the colors and the experience of them and like right in the moment of looking at them. It's not taking you away in your imagination to a location, to looking at trees, to looking at anything representational. You're just there with the colors, and like your emotional and visceral response to the colors and the shapes. And then some wondering almost more from the material aspect of how did they get that bleed to come down through there? How did they get that rough edge? What's like, how was this created? How are these two rectangles attached to each other? And become so much more about like being right there in the moment with the material.
Mm-hmm.
That really seemed to access that same curiosity and that like deep looking, that deep observation, but from a place that had sort of like pushed everything aside from the sort of like the location or the locus of the work, right?
Yeah. That's another good observation, the kind of material usage and handling, right? Because a lot of these kinds of works are so dependent on that surface and the craft of them, and like being able to get up close and inspect them to really unpack like what was done first. How do these elements come together to form what we're looking at? And that even if it's not so much in a singular piece, but just the idea of like working through that material process long term to really understand the boundaries of your material or its limitations. Like there is a sort of fascination and wonder to kind of get lost in that and allow it to sort of do what it does, right? Like there's this sort of freedom in that too, even though this is like really constrained. I think for some people that can be a hard thing to access because if they don't make work, they don't know what that's like at the same time, right? They might start to have an idea somebody's kind of pushing the material around in different ways and experimenting, but making that sort of mental leap towards like the process itself is like backloaded with all this sense of like, like wonder and like searching and like discovery. That's like a nice thing to bring to the viewer.
Mm-hmm. And there's probably also like a big aspect for the artist, like she, satisfying your curiosity and like tracking these materials down that aren't usually, you just probably can't find on Amazon. There's something that's like just satisfying about that. I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exploring like the world in a different way.
It's really great. I don't know if you guys noticed, but like when you are in the gallery, kind of frames 3 images together. And when I was setting up the arrangement, this is like one of my favorite moments because it's got Montana Wilson's painting to the left of it, this one, and then Shannon Eslin's painting. And in terms of color and repetition of like shape and sort of the verticality, I really loved how those things came together. And I was like, I have to put them together. And I would hope that people would kind of pick up on that repetition and just sort of start to see these relationships, especially because like color is so central, to these paintings. It's what makes them do what they do.
Nice. That's a really nice relationship between those 3.
Yeah, they look great together.
Yeah.
Complementary.
So
nice job, Logan.
Yeah, Logan.
Yeah.
God, good job. Kick ass on this one.
Yeah, I thought it came together pretty well. I was happy with the arrangement. A lot of like little interesting things between works.